Sweetheart, this is a corporate office, not Shark Tank. We do not negotiate with junior staff. That was what Denise Snyder from Human Resources said directly to my face right after I handed her a 14-page technical document detailing every single enterprise vendor integration I had configured, every back-end database I had cleaned, and every compliance disaster I had quietly extinguished while the rest of the department was busy placing lunch orders. My name is Walter Jenkins. I am a 54-year-old senior back-end systems architect, though on paper Vanguard Tech Solutions listed me as a junior integration analyst because of a cynical corporate restructuring trick executed 3 years ago to cap salary brackets across the engineering division. I did not scream. I did not flinch when Denise gave me that patronizing little head tilt. You know the exact look I am talking about, where HR managers tilt their head, like they are trying to listen to your soul crumple under corporate gravity. I simply nodded slowly, packed up my paper portfolio, pushed back my chair, and walked calmly out of her office. Let me step back 1 week before that humiliating human resources conversation. I was sitting at my cluttered desk, eating lukewarm microwave instant soup surrounded by the persistent stench of burnt office coffee, manually reconciling a corrupted vendor data import. That specific data import should have been automated 3 years ago, but our enterprise software pipelines were utterly obsolete. Half of our primary API pathways were so badly tangled that it looked like someone had run Python code through a meat grinder and let Steve Cooper from network engineering patch it with duct tape during a midnight panic attack. I spent 5 consecutive nights staying late in the building until 9 in the evening. I personally patched 3 primary data routing pathways, manually caught a ghost billing calculation error that had been quietly draining $22,000 every month since March, and stabilized the core client database before the quarter closed. Meanwhile, my direct manager, Brad Lawson, who once forwarded me an email that he himself was directly copied on, spent his entire afternoon demonstrating the company's new custom Slack emoji wall to a group of summer interns. So when I scheduled that formal compensation review with Denise Snyder, it was not driven by inflated ego or entitlement. It was backed by hard receipts, measurable operational impact, and 5 years of documented labor. I was not demanding an executive corner office or a flashy corporate title. I simply wanted the basic human dignity of a salary adjustment that accurately reflected the blood, sweat, and expertise I was wringing out of my keyboard every single week. Instead, Denise Snyder smiled her practiced corporate smile, adjusted her gold-rimmed reading glasses, and told me that Vanguard Tech Solutions maintained strict, unyielding compensation bands for junior employees. "We have to be fair to the entire team, Walter," she chirped cheerfully, as if she were delivering a holiday bonus instead of a professional slap in the face. The team she was referring to was the exact same group of middle managers who panicked and locked themselves out of 4 critical vendor portals the moment I took a single personal day off the previous month. I left the Human Resources department with a stone face and white knuckles. I did not vent to my coworkers in the break room. I did not send a heated email to management. I drove home in silence, brewed a fresh cup of dark roast peppermint tea, opened my personal laptop at my kitchen table, and logged into my professional network account for the first time in 6 months. I did not bother updating my public headline or posting a dramatic inspirational status update about corporate resilience. Instead, I carefully examined our corporate partner directory. I compiled a comprehensive, detailed spreadsheet of every logistics client, external contractor, and enterprise partner Vanguard Tech Solutions had ever serviced over the past decade. My private web browser history quietly transformed into a targeted, systematic operational map. If the executives at Vanguard Tech Solutions believed 54-year-old Walter Jenkins was nothing more than an easily replaceable junior worker bound by cheap corporate policies, I was more than willing to let them test that theory in open daylight. I turned off my laptop, slept peacefully for 7 hours, and prepared to execute a long, calculated strategy. Standing in the parking lot after that meeting with Denise Snyder, I looked back up at the top floor of Vanguard Tech Solutions. The tinted glass warehouse windows reflected the gray sky, cold and unfeeling. For 5 years, I had poured my technical expertise into that building. When their main server cluster crashed during a midnight thunderstorm 2 summers ago, I was the one who drove 30 miles through torrential rain to manually reset the power distribution units while Brad Lawson slept peacefully at home. When an offshore vendor corrupted our database tables, I spent 48 continuous hours writing custom recovery scripts to restore 3 terabytes of critical customer records without losing a single line of data. Yet, despite all of that dedication, to Denise Snyder and the executive suite, I was nothing more than a line item on an expense spreadsheet labeled junior staff. In their eyes, my 54 years of life and decades of technical mastery were irrelevant compared to their arbitrary corporate rules and salary cap bands. They assumed that because I was quiet, polite, and did not participate in office politics, I would simply accept whatever crumbs they tossed my way. They failed to realize that quiet people are often the most dangerous observers. Over 5 years, I had mapped out every structural flaw in their organization. I knew which managers were falsifying their weekly status reports. I knew which department heads were sharing administrative login credentials across unsecured messaging channels. I knew every single place where Vanguard Tech Solutions was violating federal compliance guidelines to save a few $1,000s on software licenses. I walked to my sedan, placed my portfolio on the passenger seat, and started the engine. As I drove home through the evening traffic, the frustration that had been building inside me for months transformed into a cold, diamond-sharp clarity. I was done asking for permission. I was done begging for a raise. From that moment on, I was going to use every piece of knowledge I possessed to build an inescapable trap for the people who had treated me like disposable labor. 2 days into my discreet job search, an unread notification popped up in my personal inbox that caught my immediate attention. The subject line read, "Quick Sync Vendor Audit Prep Inquiry." The message was sent directly by James Thornton, a senior systems director at Aegis Logistics. Aegis Logistics was Vanguard Tech Solutions' largest and oldest enterprise client, generating over $3 million in annual recurring contract revenue. If Vanguard Tech Solutions was a struggling local auto repair shop, Aegis Logistics was the wealthy corporate fleet owner that kept paying us every quarter simply because changing service providers felt too disruptive to their daily operations. James Thornton wrote that my name had repeatedly appeared in historical system incident logs. He noted that 6 months prior, I had personally identified and resolved an obscure database synchronization error that had been misfiled by our upper management as an external server outage. He asked if I was available for an informal, off-the-record discussion regarding back-end system compliance and operational stability. I took a personal paid day off that Friday. I told my manager, Brad Lawson, that I needed to attend a routine medical appointment. Brad did not even look up from his mobile phone screen as he waved his hand carelessly to dismiss me. He likely assumed I was staying home to emotionally recover from my rejected salary negotiation with human resources. I smiled politely, grabbed my jacket, and walked out of the building. I arrived at Aegis Logistics corporate headquarters wearing my sharpest navy blazer. James Thornton greeted me in a spacious, glass-walled conference room equipped with fresh espresso machines and digital whiteboards. He did not waste a single minute with hollow corporate small talk. "We do not want to throw your current employer under the bus, Walter," James said candidly while handing me a cup of dark espresso. "But our internal audit team has been tracking system errors for 2 full quarters. Every single time an emergency technical fix actually succeeds, your signature is on the patch notes. Meanwhile, our executive reporting portals are currently held together with zip ties, prayers, and manual spreadsheet exports." James explained that Aegis Logistics was preparing for their mandatory annual vendor compliance audit. Under federal guidelines, including strict internal control standards derived from the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, Title 15 of the United States Code, Section 7262, enterprise clients are legally required to audit third-party software providers for data security vulnerabilities and operational risks. Furthermore, Aegis Logistics was deeply concerned about software licensing rights and potential intellectual property violations. Under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, because Vanguard Tech Solutions had repeatedly failed to deliver clean source documentation for proprietary integration tools. They did not need another polished marketing presentation from Brad Lawson. They did not need colorful pie charts or empty promises. They needed a seasoned technical surgeon who knew every broken line of legacy code hidden inside Vanguard's infrastructure. James Thornton slid a leather folder across the polished conference table. It contained a formal employment contract for a brand new executive position, lead systems auditor at Aegis Logistics. The offer included complete authority over vendor reviews, comprehensive health benefits, and a base compensation package that was nearly double what Vanguard Tech Solutions was paying me. "There is one key requirement," James added with a calm, confident smile. "We need you to lead our external audit team during the upcoming vendor review of Vanguard Tech Solutions next month. You know exactly where the operational bottlenecks, compliance errors, and hidden shortcuts are buried." I looked over the contract terms, felt the lingering weight of 5 years of unappreciated labor evaporate, and signed the employment agreement on the spot. I agreed to start officially in 3 weeks, right after completing my standard notice period. I walked home through the crisp autumn afternoon air with a renewed sense of clarity and determination. I was no longer an overworked junior analyst pleading for a minor salary raise from Denise Snyder. I was now the designated corporate auditor, holding the legal microscope over the very executives who had dismissed me as irrelevant. As I sat in that glass conference room at Aegis Logistics headquarters, looking at James Thornton across the table, I could see the stark contrast between a real enterprise organization and the circus I was currently working for at Vanguard Tech Solutions. Here, the atmosphere was professional, serious, and grounded in mutual respect. James Thornton did not talk down to me. He did not call me sweetheart, nor did he hide behind HR jargon. He spoke to me as an equal, acknowledging my deep technical knowledge and respecting the results I had delivered over the years. Our conversation delved deep into the legal and operational liabilities Vanguard Tech Solutions had created. Under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, Title 15 of the United States Code, Section 7262, publicly traded corporations and their major logistics partners are held strictly liable for internal accounting controls and vendor data integrity. James showed me internal emails from Vanguard's executive team that had repeatedly brushed off Aegis Logistics security inquiries with vague, automated boilerplate responses signed by Brad Lawson. Vanguard's management thought they could play shell games with their enterprise clients forever. They believed that, because Aegis Logistics had been using their software platform for nearly a decade, the switching costs would be too high for Aegis to ever walk away. They assumed Aegis would just keep paying their massive quarterly invoices regardless of how buggy or vulnerable the platform became. They had no idea that Aegis Logistics was already actively building a contingency plan, and that I was the exact piece of the puzzle they were missing. When James Thornton outlined the terms of the lead systems auditor position, he made it clear that I would have full executive support, a dedicated budget, and direct reporting lines to their chief information officer. My salary would jump from $65,000 to $125,000 annually, accompanied by full performance bonuses and premium medical coverage. Looking at the signature line on that contract, I realized this was not just a career move. It was a complete reversal of power. By taking this role, I was stepping into a position where Vanguard Tech Solutions would be legally obligated to answer every question I asked, open every database I requested, and submit to every security audit I ordered. I signed my name in clean dark ink, shook James Thornton's hand firmly, and walked out into the sunlight knowing that the countdown to accountability had officially begun. For the next 2 weeks, I operated inside Vanguard Tech Solutions with calculated precision and absolute calm. By day, I maintained my quiet, unassuming routine, completing assigned help desk tickets without causing a single ripple of suspicion. By evening, I prepared comprehensive audit protocols and technical compliance checklists for Aegis Logistics. I carefully gathered my own historical work logs, architecture diagrams, and system performance notes that I had authored over the past 5 years. I organized these records into a pristine compliance file, I documented unencrypted credential stores, shared administrative passwords, and obsolete software dependencies that Vanguard's management had systematically ignored to cut operational overhead costs. At the office, nothing had changed. Brad Lawson continued to dump low-level formatting tasks onto my desk, asking me to color-code quarterly bar charts so they looked less intimidating for executive slide decks. He never asked how the underlying data pipelines functioned, nor did he care that our automated database backup scripts had failed 3 times in a single week. Denise Snyder passed me in the hallway once, offering a fleeting, polite nod as if I were an inanimate piece of office furniture that she had forgotten to dust. They both operated under the comfortable assumption that a 54-year-old worker was trapped by age and bound by corporate complacency. On a quiet Wednesday morning, I logged into the internal employee portal and submitted my formal resignation letter. I gave standard 2 weeks' notice, attaching a concise statement expressing polite gratitude for my time with the firm. The automated HR system processed my request without requiring a face-to-face meeting. Denise Snyder did not even bother to request an exit interview. She simply dispatched an automated email containing a generic PDF titled Transition Procedures for Departing Junior Staff. Ironically, the attached file was corrupted and could not be opened. I saved it to my personal drive as a permanent reminder of their operational standards. Brad Lawson sauntered over to my workstation later that afternoon. He leaned heavily against my cubicle partition, sipping his iced coffee with an air of mild condescension. "So you are jumping ship, Walter?" Brad chuckled, shaking his head with amusement. "Let me guess, taking an early retirement or moving to a smaller consulting outfit. Corporate life outside Vanguard is tough for guys at your stage. Mark my words, most people realize the grass is not greener and end up coming back." I maintained a polite, relaxed posture and replied, "Thank you for the perspective, Brad. I appreciate your advice." On my final Friday afternoon, I quietly packed my personal belongings into a small cardboard box. I packed my favorite ceramic coffee mug, my ergonomic wrist rest, and the mechanical keyboard I had purchased with my own money. I wiped down my desktop surface, left my building access key on the empty desk, and walked out to the parking lot without looking back once. Over the weekend, I reviewed the final audit itinerary with James Thornton. Aegis Logistics had officially notified Vanguard Tech Solutions that an external enterprise compliance audit would commence on Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp. I spent Sunday evening ironing my Navy suit, polishing my dress shoes, and reviewing statutory compliance standards under federal software security frameworks. The stage was set, the evidence was cataloged, and Monday morning was finally here. During my final 2 weeks at Vanguard Tech Solutions, watching Brad Lawson and Denise function in their daily routine was like watching people walk along the edge of a cliff without knowing the ground beneath them was already crumbling. Brad spent hours in his office curating playlist recommendations for department team building events and arguing with office management over the brand of sparkling water provided in the executive lounge. He remained entirely oblivious to the technical debt accumulating under his watch. Every time Brad assigned me a trivial task, such as formatting PowerPoint slides or reorganizing shared drive folders, I completed it promptly with a calm smile. I did not want to trigger a single warning sign. I maintained my usual quiet demeanor, attended every mundane morning status meeting, and politely nodded whenever management made unrealistic promises to clients on conference calls. Meanwhile, behind the scenes I was meticulously constructing the audit framework that would dismantle their house of cards. Using the sandbox environment provided by Aegis Logistics, I built automated audit scripts designed to ping Vanguard's public-facing endpoints, measure latency bottlenecks, and flag compliance gaps in real time. I cross-referenced Vanguard's published vendor security documentation against their actual server configurations, identifying over 40 distinct statutory violations. When Wednesday arrived and I submitted my formal resignation, the sheer apathy from human resources was almost comical. Denise Snyder's automated email response contained no exit questionnaire, no offer to match my new compensation, and no inquiry into why a veteran technical architect was leaving after 5 years. To Denise, my departure was simply one less headcount to worry about on her monthly payroll report. When Brad Lawson made his arrogant comment about people returning to Vanguard after realizing the grass was not greener, it took everything in my power not to laugh out loud. Brad truly believed that Vanguard Tech Solutions was the peak of corporate employment, entirely blind to the fact that his department was performing at a fraction of industry standards. As I carried my cardboard box of personal belongings out to my car on my final Friday, I paused at the lobby entrance for a brief moment. The air was fresh and cool. I adjusted my grip on the box, took a deep breath, and felt a profound sense of liberation. The junior analyst was gone. On Monday morning, the auditor would arrive. On Monday morning at 8:45, I walked through the sliding glass doors of Vanguard Tech Solutions' main lobby. I was wearing my tailored Navy suit, carrying a sleek leather laptop briefcase, and wearing a prominent red visitor badge issued by Aegis Logistics that reads, Lead Systems Auditor. Security did not question my clearance. I bypassed the employee turnstiles and took the main elevator directly to the executive floor. When the elevator doors opened on the fourth floor, the reaction was immediate and chaotic. Kyle, from the data management department, stopped in mid-stride, dropping his clipboards onto the carpeted floor. Two junior developers standing near the water cooler whispered to each other as I walked past them with a steady, confident stride. Outside the primary conference room, Denise Snyder from Human Resources was holding her insulated water bottle. As her eyes landed on my new credentials, her jaw tightened and her polite smile completely vanished. Good morning, Denise, I said calmly, offering a brief nod. Walter? Denise stammered, her voice dropping an octave. What are you doing here? Are you returning to turn in your company equipment? I am here to conduct the vendor compliance audit on behalf of Aegis Logistics, I replied smoothly. Pushing open the glass door to the main executive conference room. Inside the conference room, Vice President of Operations Gordon Pierce was arranging printed financial slide decks across the large mahogany table. Next to him sat my former manager, Brad Lawson. When Gordon saw me walk in at the head of the Aegis audit delegation, he startled so violently that he knocked his full mug of black coffee directly onto his presentation folders. What is the meaning of this? Gordon demanded, frantically dabbing his stained tie with a paper napkin. Walter, you resigned last week. Why are you sitting in the lead auditor chair? I opened my laptop, connected it to the high-definition projector wall, and pulled up our official audit authorization letter. Pursuant to Section 9.3 of the Master Vendor Agreement between Aegis Logistics and Vanguard Tech Solutions, I stated in a clear, measured voice, Aegis Logistics is exercising its contractual right to conduct a full retroactive 12-month compliance and operational security audit. I am leading this audit as lead systems auditor. The room fell into dead silence. Brad Lawson turned pale, staring at me as if he were looking at a ghost in a business suit. Over the next 4 hours, I systematically presented our findings. I projected detailed system logs showing that Vanguard Tech Solutions had stored unencrypted administrative credentials in a public shared folder accessible to unverified external IP addresses. This violated basic data security requirements under Penal Code Section 470 provisions regarding unauthorized access safeguards and constituted a severe breach of fiduciary duty under corporate vendor governance. When Gordon Pierce tried to interrupt by claiming those security oversights were the fault of low-level technical workers, I paused, zoomed in on the electronics signature history of the credential spreadsheet, and looked him directly in the eyes. According to your internal audit records, Gordon, those system configurations were authorized under your direct supervisor identification number, and the maintenance was assigned to a junior analyst. In fact, I believe that junior analyst was me. Gordon Pierce froze in place. Denise Snyder swallowed hard, unable to offer a single word of defense. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Aegis Logistics formally issued a legal notice suspending all pending vendor payments to Vanguard Tech Solutions, freezing over $1 million in quarterly revenue, pending complete operational remediation. The atmosphere in that fourth-floor conference room shifted from arrogant confusion to sheer, unadulterated panic within the first 30 minutes of my presentation. As I projected line after line of unencrypted server credentials, exposed administrative access keys, and long-abandoned API endpoints onto the screen, Gordon Pierce's face turned from flushed red to a pale, ghostly white. Brad Lawson tried to interject early on, attempting to play down the severity of the findings. "Walter, these are just legacy development logs," Brad stammered, attempting a casual laugh that failed miserably. "Every tech firm has a few old files sitting in archive directories. It is not like anyone outside the company actually accessed them." I did not argue with Brad. Instead, I simply pressed a key on my laptop to advance to the next slide, displaying a detailed network access log. "Actually, Brad," I noted calmly, "according to these verified firewall logs, this specific unencrypted credential file was accessed 47 times over the past 3 months from unauthorized IP addresses located in foreign jurisdictions. Furthermore, because these credentials grant full read and write administrative privileges to Aegis Logistics' active customer data tables, this security breach directly triggers mandatory reporting requirements under Title 15 of the United States Code, Section 7262. Gordon Pierce slammed his pen onto the table. 47 times? He gasped, glaring directly at Brad Lawson. "Brad, why was I never informed about this?" Brad opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked desperately toward Denise Snyder, but Denise was staring intently at her notepad, refusing to make eye contact with anyone in the room. I continued through my audit dossier with cold, surgical precision. I detailed how Vanguard Tech Solutions had failed to maintain valid SSL certificates across 6 primary data gateways, how they had ignored 3 written warning notices regarding database performance degradation, and how management had systematically concealed system outages from Aegis Logistics to avoid paying contractual SLA penalty fees. By the time I reached the final section of my presentation, which outlines statutory penalties under breach of fiduciary duty doctrines and federal software compliance guidelines, the executive team was completely shattered. Gordon Pierce looked like a man who had just realized his entire company was standing on quicksand. When I formally handed Gordon the payment suspension notice signed by Aegis Logistics' legal counsel, his hands were visibly shaking. Over $1 million in quarterly revenue was frozen instantly, putting Vanguard Tech Solutions in immediate financial jeopardy. By Tuesday morning, Vanguard Tech Solutions was in a state of complete organizational panic. The suspension of Aegis Logistics vendor payments triggered immediate shockwaves throughout the executive suite. Brad Lawson posted a vague statement on his social media profile about career transitions and navigating corporate challenges, while Vice President Gordon Pierce spent his morning locked in emergency calls with corporate legal counsel. Denise Snyder avoided the 4th floor entirely. Later that afternoon, I received an urgent email from Gordon Pierce. The email contained a formal request asking if I would be willing to accept a short-term private consulting contract to help Vanguard Tech Solutions resolve the security compliance failures identified in the audit. "Given your specialized knowledge of our legacy architecture," Gordon wrote, "we are prepared to offer an attractive consulting fee to stabilize these critical issues." I read the message, smiled quietly, and sent a prompt reply. "My consulting fee is $500 per hour, payable weekly in advance, with a 20-hour minimum retainer per week." Non-negotiable. Within 45 minutes, Gordon Pierce signed the agreement without contesting a single clause. While overseeing the compliance remediation, I also took note of the talented, hard-working employees at Vanguard who were being underpaid and ignored by management just as I had been. Over the next 2 weeks, I conducted formal interviews and hired 3 outstanding back-end developers and 2 senior compliance specialists away from Vanguard Tech Solutions to join my growing department at Aegis Logistics. 10 days later, Aegis Logistics issued its final determination. Because Vanguard Tech Solutions had failed to maintain required operational standards and had committed material breaches of contract, Aegis Logistics officially exercised its right to terminate the master service agreement under formal notification standards aligned with Title 29 of the United States Code. Section 2101. Aegis Logistics transferred its entire infrastructure management portfolio in-house under my direct supervision. My department expanded to oversee all enterprise IT operations, vendor compliance, and system security. On my final day of the audit at Vanguard's office, I held a closing review in Conference Room 3B. Denise Snyder was summoned to attend to finalize administrative offboarding documentation for the transition. She walked into the conference room holding a thick folder, her former confidence completely gone. She sat across from me, her hands trembling slightly as she arranged her papers. I slid a final executive summary document across the table. Listed near the top were structural recommendations for Vanguard's leadership, including the complete restructuring of their human resources management team due to systemic compliance oversights. Denise read the page, her face growing pale as she looked up at me. I looked at her with a calm, professional expression and said softly, "Sweetheart, we do negotiate now, but only with people who understand the value of competence." I closed my laptop, placed it into my leather briefcase, and walked out of the building into the bright afternoon sun, leaving Vanguard Tech Solutions to reckon with the fire they had started themselves. The fallout inside Vanguard Tech Solutions over the following fortnight was swift and devastating. Without the steady, reliable revenue stream from Aegis Logistics, Vanguard's executive board launched an immediate internal investigation into department management. Gordon Pierce was forced to submit weekly emergency reports to the board of directors, while Brad Lawson was stripped of his project management authority and reassigned to handle basic customer service complaints. When Gordon Pierce agreed to my $500 per hour consulting fee, he did so out of absolute desperation. Over the next 10 days, I spent 20 hours a week consulting for Vanguard, charging them $10,000 a week, simply to guide their panicked engineering team through basic security remediation steps that I had originally offered to implement months ago as part of my regular salary. During those consulting sessions, I observed the remaining junior developers working under Brad. They were exhausted, underpaid, and demoralized. I quietly pulled 3 of the brightest engineers aside, talented professionals who had been passed over for promotions just as I had been, and offered them senior roles at Aegis Logistics with 40% salary increases. All 3 accepted immediately, leaving Vanguard's technical department completely gutted. When the final termination notice was delivered to Vanguard Tech Solutions under formal standards aligned with Title 29 of the United States Code, Section 2101, it marked the official end of their contract with Aegis. Aegis Logistics formally severed all business ties, absorbed the entire technical infrastructure in-house, and established our new internal compliance and architecture division. On my very last day, inside Vanguard's building, sitting across from Denise Snyder in Conference Room 3B, the silence between us was heavy with poetic justice. Denise, who had once sneered that human resources does not negotiate with junior staff, was now holding an executive recommendation report that advised upper management to eliminate her position due to severe HR administrative negligence. When I looked her dead in the eye and delivered those final words, "Sweetheart, we do negotiate now, but only with people who understand the value of competence," I saw the realization hit her with full force. She understood then that titles, corporate jargon, and condescending smiles mean nothing when confronted with true expertise and relentless documentation. I walked out of Vanguard Tech Solutions for the last time, stepping into the warm afternoon sun with my leather briefcase in hand. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove toward Aegis Logistics headquarters, ready to lead my new team into a bright, empowering future.